Hi, I'm Mark Regev, speaking to you from Jerusalem for another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. And we are joined today once again from New York City, my co-host, Ruthie Blum.
Hi, Mark.
Good to see you again, Ruthie. And we had big news since we last talked. There were 3 young women, Israeli hostages, released from Gaza. In Israel, it was wall-to-wall celebration to see these 3 people come home. Not that there weren't some who had serious concerns about the deal. How did you see it from New York?
Well, like everybody else, I was weeping tears of joy, but I think this deal is atrocious. Of course, I'm delighted that those women came home, and I want to see all of them home. That doesn't mean that this was a good deal. For those 3 women, we released 90 bloodthirsty terrorists from Israeli jails. And also, by the end of this 6-week period, in the first phase of the deal, we're only going to see 33 hostages, not 94 who are languishing in the tunnels of Gaza. It's terrible. And what's more, I don't believe Hamas is going to uphold the deal because Hamas is also a terrorist organization.
So, Ruthie, I understand your concerns, and I can respect them, but there's an old saying, if you say all or nothing, you can end up with nothing. And though there's no guarantee we're going to get all the hostages out, getting 3 out, that's 3 lives we've saved, and hopefully we'll get many more than 3. And I would argue that that in itself is a positive mood. And I just saw these 3 women, and you could see their strength. And if you think what they must have been through over the last year and 3 months, that they are amazingly strong women. And I think all Israel was embracing them and their families. I know who we're dealing with. We're dealing with a brutal, cutthroat, extremist, horrific terrorist organization. We all saw the violence they're capable of, and who knows what these women went through in their captivity. But terrorists understand strength, terrorists understand force, and in agreeing to this deal, which they didn't agree to these conditions a few months ago, it's just a sign of how Israel has managed from the calamity of October 7th to turn this around, to turn the pressure on our enemies. Hamas today is greatly weakened, unfortunately not dead, but greatly weakened. They are isolated. Their so-called allies have also been greatly weakened, whether it's Hezbollah or Syria or Iran. And I think that has forced them to release at least some of our people. And as I say, if you say all or nothing, you could end up with nothing. We're going to get some people out, and that's crucial.
Well, I agree. That's probably why we agreed to it, why it was kind of no choice, because we were unable to rescue them in a major operation. So, of course, you can say there's no choice. But what about all those future hostages, dead bodies, raped women, whose names we don't know yet, because they're going to be the victims of those terrorists who are being released from jail. And we know 82% of all of those released in 2011 in the Shalit deal, 82% proceeded to repeat offenses. And they've even said, we want to perpetrate another October 7th again and again and again. And we have to believe them. They mean it. So I'm just saying, as we are delighted to receive any hostage, dead or alive, from Gaza, don't forget that we are signing a death warrant for many, many Israelis whose identities are not on posters right now.
And I think that's the issue, because, we all see, walking around every street in Israel, you see the pictures and the names of the hostages held in Gaza. And if the statistics are correct, and they are the statistics of the Israeli, the Shin Bet, the security services, the majority of people released will return to terrorist activity. And then we don't have the names or the pictures of those future victims. And when you do a release like this, there is a danger, I have no doubt. On the other hand, you've got a tangible name. There's someone whose life you can save today. Do you not do it?
Well, of course, and we did it. So, it's true. There were many Israelis who were hesitant about the deal, but not because of the released hostages. Of course, all Israelis want them released, but because of these other considerations. Furthermore, this deal is not merely a swap between innocent Israelis and terrorists in Israeli jails. There are more parts to this deal. First of all, it's a ceasefire for 6 weeks, which is during which time only 33 hostages will have been released, many dead, I believe. And that's one thing. Second, the second phase requires a demilitarization of Gaza. You tell me, what are the chances that that's going to happen? Or, by the way, what do you think the chances are that in this 6-week period, Hamas is going to release in each week the number it claims it will be releasing according to the deal? And then you tell me, what happens if on Saturday, when 4 more hostages are supposed to be released? What happens if only 3 are released? Is that a violation? Would the public or the world enable us to say, okay, we're resuming fighting in Gaza? I highly doubt it.
I disagree, Ruthie. If they are an egg on the deal, if they don't perform according to what they've committed to do, I think Israel will have great legitimacy to restart our military machine, to get back to fighting them in Gaza. The Americans, the Egyptians, the Qataris all know what's been agreed. And if Qatar doesn't fulfill its promises, Israel will have total legitimacy to go back and start hitting Hamas hard, I have no doubt.
Yes, but as I said, what will constitute an actual violation? That's why I said, what if only 3 come out?
No, I think that's a violation. I think 3 is a violation.
No, but then again, the families of all of the hostages, as you said, better to save any lives than not have all or nothing. So imagine you're in that position where
no, but if the truth is, it's a slippery slope. If you agree to one small violation, you'll just get more and more and more. And the Israeli government understands that. There's a deal. It was a difficult deal to negotiate. It was difficult for Israel. And if Hamas starts playing games and not fulfilling what they've promised, they haven't promised us, they've promised the Americans, the Qataris, the Egyptians. If they start playing games, the deal is off and the Israeli military goes back into action into Gaza, I'm sure of it.
All right. Well, then that brings us to another point here, that the hostages who were released, these young women, reported they're starting to tell their stories. Of course, they're undergoing serious medical and psychological tests, which is natural since it's unbelievable how good they look considering where they spent the last 15 months. I mean, they were able to walk on their own, but we know the tortures they were enduring. We know that from the other hostages who had been released already. So one of the things that they recounted is that part of their captivity was spent in an UNRWA tent camp, set up for Gazans who were displaced during the war, or when Israel told Gazans to get out of harm's way so that we could continue the fighting. They were held in an UNRWA facility, so that because Hamas knew that Israel would never bomb an UNRWA facility, despite what UNRWA and the international community keeps accusing us of doing. So, and we know that UNRWA is in bed with Hamas in every sense of the word. It's, again, we keep finding new evidence, more evidence of how deeply embedded they are.
So you're 100% correct on that one. UNRWA, as we know, is works hand in glove with Hamas. In fact, the Israeli government a few months ago released all these statistics on how many UNRWA personnel are actually members of Hamas or family members of Hamas members and so forth. And we know from the first big prisoner released November 23, hostages came back and they said they were held in the houses of UNRWA officials, in the private dwellings of people who got their salary from the United Nations, were holding Israeli hostages. So this new news, it's I don't think it's unimportant, but it's more of the same. It just confirms what we know about UNRWA, which is, as an organization, UNRWA has been infiltrated and is now in many ways a part of the Hamas structure. And one of the major problems we face and the world faces is that to end Hamas's control of Gaza, which is one of the goals of this war, along with destroying Hamas's military machine and getting all the hostages out. But one of the problems is in getting rid of Hamas's political rule over Gaza, you've got to deal with the patronage. And what has happened up until now is that because UNRWA is Hamas, Hamas uses UNRWA to give out the aid, and as long as they're giving out the aid that the people of Gaza need, you can't replace Hamas as the political leadership. And I hope that in the coming weeks, on the assumption that this ceasefire holds and the hostages are continued to be released, that there will be serious thought as to how aid is delivered to the people of Gaza, because if it continues to be done through UNRWA, then we're just going to see the perpetuation of Hamas's rule in Gaza.
Yes, and this is one of the issues that the government has had with the army. Now, we know that our chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, yesterday submitted his resignation. He will be leaving on March 6th, he said. He was against having the army, the Israeli army, distribute the humanitarian aid. I think that was a serious mistake because it was in the hands of, wasn't only UNRWA, other international groups and the World Food Kitchen. By the way, we'll get to that also. They were, let's put it this way, if they weren't actively helping Hamas was stealing, commandeering the trucks, stealing the aid, selling it at exorbitant prices to Gazans, and then using the money to recruit new terrorists to replace the ones the IDF had eliminated. This is outrageous. So this is one of the arguments I know that the government has had, certain members of the government in particular, with the way the IDF has handled this entire situation, including having missed the October 7th massacre. This is outrageous that, we have a top military echelon that kind of goes against what the troops on the ground want to do, which is finish the job, which is take care of the terrorists. And we have an army that's holding back. So perhaps Herzi Halevi's resignation will be beneficial, because I have no doubt we're going to have to go back into Gaza and fight. Hamas does not keep its word. What kind of word is it? It's funny how people think that a group of people who rape, maim, behead, murder, kidnap, that they wouldn't also lie,
No, I agree with you on that last point. As to the army obviously wants to fight the war and to win, and they don't want to be given other responsibilities. They'll only adopt those responsibilities if the political echelon insists on it. The Israeli army delivering the aid is one option. I hope we can find other non-Hamas options. And now that there's a ceasefire, it's possible that those options can be vigorously pursued. But before we leave UNRWA, I just wanted to remind you and our audience that as one of the things that the new president of the United States has done is that he's cut off the funding for UNRWA once again. He cut it off when he was president the first time, and it was sort of reinstated to a certain extent under the Biden administration. They thought it was very important that humanitarian aid be delivered to the Palestinians, and UNRWA was the vehicle to do it. And now apparently the Congress didn't fund it, so I'm not sure how much money was actually spent and delivered. But now the president has once again, as in his first few days in office, stopped the American funding of UNRWA again. This is something I think it's good, because as long as UNRWA is the vehicle, Hamas has this surrogate. By not funding UNRWA, you're forcing the creation of alternative sources, and that's ultimately good, not only for aid delivery, but that's good for the political future of Gaza too.
Well, also, we have to keep in mind that Biden was forced to pause, even though Biden reinstated funding to UNRWA in January last year. He He paused it when it turned out that several UNRWA employees participated in the October 7th massacre and abduction of hostages. So he was forced to do that. And in the meantime, you keep saying we have to find other bodies to distribute the aid. The international bodies are rotten, and they're in bed with the worst actors in the world. It's funny. They make money doing it. The UN is a completely rotten organization, as said the incoming U.S. ambassador to the UN, Elisa Stefanik, in her hearings yesterday. She said it's rotten to the core, and she's right. So when you talk about, well, other groups should do it, the United States tried to drop aid into Gaza during the war. And guess what happened with that? They built an expensive pier. The pier fell apart. They became a laughing stock. The whole way that Biden treated this war was a joke. And good riddance to him. By the way, it's not to say that I don't have criticisms of certain members of Trump's team in relation to this war, but nobody can be as bad as the Biden administration has been.
I think it's important for people to understand. You've got some of these organizations. UNRWA has a track record which is very problematic for decades now. But even, let's say, when you've got theoretically a good international humanitarian organization that wants to try to do good, yes, the cynics would call them do-gooders. But what is the reality in Gaza? You have one or two Europeans or other foreigners who are running the organization, but they're boots on the ground, so to speak. The people who actually do the work are Gazan Palestinians. And because Hamas is an authoritarian regime, because Hamas is a terror regime, they have the ability to control the workers, because people who don't follow the Hamas line end up with a bullet or in their kneecap in mafia style, or they get shot in the head and are killed. And as a result, these organizations ultimately, in their practice, even if the leadership is not like the leadership of UNRWA, even if they're trying to do good, they end up doing Hamas's duty. And as long as Hamas is the only group in Gaza with guns in the Palestinian society, we're going to have these problems.
And it's not only that. What makes me enraged about all of those international organizations is that when some of the aid workers were killed during the war by Hamas, Israel got blamed. And that's the biggest problem. It's one thing, it's very dangerous to distribute aid in Gaza with Hamas terrorists all over and commandeering the trucks. No question about it. But the problem isn't just that. The problem is that Israel gets blamed for any casualty there. And I'm sick of it and that's why I'm really happy that Trump is really putting his foot down about all the world organizations. He's starting to fire a lot of people. He's defunding, and good for him, because all Israel needs really is more enemies in what we call the international community. That term in itself has become two dirty words as far as I'm concerned. And all Israel needed during this war was to be supported by the West. And instead, all of these groups were attacking Israel for trying to defend itself. So now when you talk about other groups having to take control in Gaza, we run into a huge problem, because still there are people talking about the Palestinian Authority taking some kind of control, and that is out of the question. Right now, we are fighting a mini war, an operation in Judea and Samaria to rid that area of the terrorists who are also Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They're a terrorist organization as well, and we cannot allow it. And we have to put our foot down with any body, organization, politician who suggests it.
So I have a different position on the PA, on the Palestinian Authority. I have no illusions about who they are and what they stand for, and sometimes they try to out Hamas in being extreme against Israel and so forth. But I presume, Ruthie, I don't know, but from my knowledge of how things work in the Israeli government, I presume that our operation against the terrorists in Jenin, the one that's going on as we speak, has been, at least to a certain extent, coordinated with the PA. I would remind you also that over the last 2-3 weeks there was PA action against certain terrorist groups in certain cities across the territories. Now, I know it's never enough. I know it's always too little, too late. I know they're not committed in a serious way to peace and reconciliation. I know that they pay terrorist salaries. I know they do all these things. But I do distinguish between them and Hamas. Just as I look at Turkey and Iran and I say, well, they're both problematic, but there is a difference. There is a difference, and it would be to ignore reality to ignore those differences.
Mark, there is a difference between Fatah and Hamas, but it's a rivalry. They share the desire to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. It's in their school books. First of all, I don't understand how you can even say that it's good. They're helping Israel to defeat the terrorists. They're paying those. Any terrorist who ends up in an Israeli jail is given a hefty stipend, monthly stipend. And if a terrorist is killed in the act as a martyr, if he's a martyr for Allah and is killed in the act while killing Jews, his family is set up in clover for life by the Palestinian Authority. That hasn't changed one iota. And that goes for the prisoners being released from jail. So yes, the PA hates Hamas because Hamas is so popular there. But it's still paying its salaries anytime Hamas terrorists kill Jews. So I'm sorry, I do not make a distinction.
So I think it's important to make the distinction, and I have no illusions whatsoever about the Palestinian Authority. I mean, their leader, President Mahmoud Abbas, he's a Holocaust revisionist, yes? He says the most outrageous things. The Germans, what was it, a year or two back, he made an official trip to Germany, and he embarrassed his German hosts by talking, by using the Holocaust, and they're very sensitive to things like that in Germany. And I know about pay for slay, and I know all these terrible things they do. I still believe, in your opinion wrongly, in my opinion rightly, that there is a difference between the two. As I said, there's a difference between Turkey and Iran too. But I want to talk about something you said before. You mentioned America's new ambassador to the United Nations. She did her hearing, and she gave a sentence which I heard was criticized by parts of the media in the United States where you are at the moment, when she said she agreed that Israel had a biblical right to Judea and Samaria, to the West Bank. And I'm not sure what she meant by biblical right. What do you think? I mean, in the 21st century, when you say you have a biblical right, what does that mean?
Well, she was quoting the Bible. It says it in Genesis, and there are other places in the Bible it says it. What she meant was that Jews have lived and had the right to live in the land of Israel for millennia, and it has nothing. And there were no Palestinians then. The Palestinians people, what they call the Palestinian people, were actually created in after the 67 war. They have very modern history. And she was saying, I stand with the Jewish right to the land of Israel because the world keeps trying to deny Jewish rights to the land of Israel. The world keeps trying to treat it like we're talking about a real estate deal. Or that we somehow occupied foreign lands. And her response was to say, no, they're not foreign lands occupied by Jews. The Jews have had a biblical right. She wasn't talking about politics at the moment. She was asked that question by a far left senator who was trying to trip her up as though she were going to stumble on those words, being so outwardly, especially talking about the Bible. And she didn't stumble because she doesn't, because that's what she believes. And she also is firmly on Israel's side, unequivocally.
So I want to take what you said and agree with part and disagree with another part. When she says that obviously the Jewish people have a historic connection to this land and that we're not occupying someone else's land, she's 100% correct. She knows, where does the word Jew come from? It comes from Jews were people who came from Judea. This is our historic homeland. This has always been the Jewish homeland. You can't be a foreign occupier on your own land, right? And I think there's a fundamental truth there. that even historically, members of the Israeli left, I mean, Rabin, who signed the Oslo agreements, said, I'm making a compromise, but I have a right to be there. I choose not to exercise the right. But the whole idea that my presence there is illegitimate from a historical point of view, from a legal point of view, I think there's a consensus in Israel that that's just simply not true. And in that she is right. We have every right to be there. Whether it is sensible to be there or not, that's a political discussion that people can have, right? And people will have in Israel too. People will have different opinions. But do we have a right to be there? I'm sure we do. Where I disagree with something when you said the Palestinian nationalism only started after the Six-Day War. Because I'm a teacher, I want you to know that if my students said that, I would correct that. Palestinian Arab nationalism actually predates the British Mandate. During the Free Turk period under the Ottoman Empire, there were elections here already, and there were candidates who wanted representation. And there was the Mufti during the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who led the Palestinian national movement. So it was a different stage in Arab Palestinian nationalism, but it definitely existed before 67.
No, that's Arab nationalism. Yes, it did. When I say the Palestinian people, I'm talking about, Arafat. That was his movement. He formed the PLO 4 years before the Six-Day War. But this whole concept of the Palestinian people became a catchphrase after the 67.
Oh, that's true. It became a catchphrase. It reached international. Yeah, that's true.
Occupation came that catchphrase, and suddenly they became the Palestinian people, not Arabs living in the land of Israel. No, they became, and that concept of the Palestinian people is nonsense, and most Arabs would agree with that it's nonsense.
Just stop, but you remember the UN Partition Plan of 1947, and here we're nitpicking, I apologize to our listeners, yes? But that talked about an Arab-Palestinian state already in 1947. I think as much as I understand that they're my enemies and that they are unfortunately they're my enemies. I wish I could make peace with them, but I believe it's impossible at the moment, yes? But I have to recognize that they are a people, that their fundamental problem is this. They want to destroy my state more than they want a state for themselves. That's the fundamental problem.
Exactly, but the point is not whether they want a state for themselves. The partition plan was about dividing Palestine. It was called Palestine, dividing Palestine between Jews and Arabs. I'm just talking about the way you refer to it, the Palestinians. Okay, and of course they rejected it, as they've rejected every single other deal, every peace agreement. They violated everything. Every time we offer peace, they perpetrate war. They don't want a state. They want to annihilate the Jewish state. They've proven this again and again and again. They continue to do so. If there's ever a chance for peace, it's got to be through strength, through victory, and through a whole change in a generation or two, in the school books, in the mosques, in the education system. It could happen. I don't think you and I will be alive to see it.
Well, I want to now, because we've only got 2-3 minutes left, I wanted to ask you something. You said something very intriguing early on, and I don't want to finish this episode without going into it. We've praised the new American ambassador to the United Nations. And Trump, since coming to power, he has stopped funding for UNRWA. He has there were sanctions on certain West Bank Judean Samaria settlers. He's removed those. And he's also reinstituted something that Biden took off. It was the sanctions on the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which has indicted, as we know, Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Gallant. But you said, despite this and this, which I'm sure you all approve with, you said there were some parts of the administration you find troubling. In 30 seconds, can you tell me what that would be?
Well, as I said, his envoy to these who sealed the deal, so to speak, I think that he's a very bad actor. He's in bed with Qatar. I think so. He's one example. And apparently an appointee who's going to be Undersecretary of Defense is another one. Is scattered in this administration. There are some bad actors. I hope Trump gets wind of it and gets rid of them. You know, he has a tendency to say you're fired when he discovers things he doesn't like. Or it could be that we're going to see a different kind of Trump administration from the one we saw last time. Still, I will say it again and again, that nothing, as far as I'm concerned, neither for the United States nor for Israel, can be worse than the Biden administration.
And I will end with this thought, that Trump is a historic president in that he came back from a political, from a loss and won again. And he's a strong leader. And I don't think he's going to let any one of his underlings working for him in this administration dictate policy. He's going to dictate policy. And as a result, I think I'd be very cautious if you say you have problems with his with his Middle East envoy and so forth. Because my assumption is these people are working for him and they know what their boss wants.
Well, let's hope that the boss still wants the same things that I think he does in that case.
And on that note, I'll say goodbye and look forward to seeing you again next week, Ruthie.
Yes. And then after that, I will be back in Israel, and then we will both be in the studio together. And please remember to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell.
See you next week, Ruthie.